So let's directly continue with the next topic, being the enhancements we have in device management and the context of thin edge. So the first topic I would like to speak about is the flexible payload decoding we introduced for Lightweight M2M. So Lightweight M2M comes with a standardized data model, which consists of the so-called objects and resources. And in the past, you had to map each of these resources from the Lightweight M2M data model individually to the Cumulocity data model, which makes it quite difficult if you have more complex mappings, like if you want to aggregate different values and so on. So going forward, we will leverage the MQTT service, which is currently in preview, which also will be covered by Jane later on. And we're basically dropping the payload that is collected by the Lightweight M2M agent on top of the MQTT service, which allows you to basically fetch this data using a custom microservice, decoder microservice, and that allows you to complete freedom of how you want to deal with that and decode that payload and to work with that. So you can handle that anyhow you want. The next topic I would like to cover is the software type support for device profiles. So the software type in general is a concept we introduced quite some time ago, but it was until now restricted to the software repository. So the idea was to introduce these types to differentiate between different kind of software types, so that when you upload it, you see you can more easily identify what kind of software you have in your repository. You now can also leverage this in the device profiles. So the device profiles allow you to collect basically everything you need to provision your device, be it configuration files, software files, as well as the firmware of the device. And so you have now also this entire transparency in your device profiles, and when sending down the new device profile to a device or to multiple devices, this information will also be sent as part of the operation, which also allows you to leverage this information on your device. So it's also already integrated with thin edge. So you can have this information also available on thin edge as well, providing you in general better transparency. Another improvement we did in the context of software management is the introduction of the ability to control software services remotely. So as we see the software and the workload being executed on devices at the edge is becoming more and more complex, with containerized solutions, with AI models being executed on the edge. We see also the increasing need to, of course, also manage these over their life cycle. So in the past, we already introduced capabilities to deploy software, of course, as I already mentioned, like installing, reinstalling, updating software, also to monitor software services running on your device. You can basically send any kind of metrics you want. But of course, you would also want to interact with these services in case you potentially run into an issue or you want to stop that service. And that's what you can do now. So we offer default actions, including restarting, stopping, and starting a service. But we also provide you with the full flexibility of being able to define your own commands, your own actions. So this is quite extensible and flexible framework that we introduced in order to interact with your service. You also have a dedicated command tab to see all the commands being sent to the service running on your device, also for troubleshooting cases and so on all auditing purposes. And this will, going forward, not yet, but will be also integrated with thin edge. So you can also leverage it, for example, in the context of the container management plugin that's available for thin edge. Another improvements that we did was in the context of the device map. So the device map is basically the place to go to get an overview of the geographical distribution of your deployment, see where all your devices are right now. But there were also some limitations regarding the number of devices that were visible on that map, which was restricted to 100 devices. And even with 100 devices on that map, especially with dense deployments, it's quite overwhelming visually, and you also weren't able to change the default center of the map, and that's something, all of that has been addressed now. So we overcame the limitation of the number of devices. You can define your own center. So if you have a deployment in Australia, you don't need to start in Germany. but have a direct center in the area of your deployment, and also in dense areas with a lot of devices per square meter or so. We also basically aggregate these and just show it via one marker. So it also is way more easier to consume for a user to get an overview where your devices are. The next one I'm quite excited to introduce is the Passthrough functionality for cloud remote access, which is now available per default. So the the Passthrough option is actually the most flexible and advanced option when it comes to cloud remote access, as it allows you to tunnel basically any TCP port to your device, to your local machine, be it an SSH server, be it a local HTTP server or a web UI. And this is now a default option that's available when using Cloud Remote Access. So if you subscribe to the Cloud Remote Access service, but the great thing is that this is also part of the entire chain offered by Cumulocity. So you have the local, the device proxy that needs to be deployed on your device as part of ThinEdge, and also the local proxy which needs to be deployed on your machine as part of the Cumulocity CLI. So in the combination of the Cloud Remote Access Service of Cumulocity, ThinEdge, and Cumulocity CLI, you can perfectly leverage this functionality. That's it for the Q1 news. Now I want to also provide an outlook what you can expect in the next weeks and months. So in the context of Cloud Remote Access, we have some additional functionalities or something we will introduce, which is the option to report supported protocols. So as of today, we list, as you can see here in the model you see on the right side, basically all protocols that are supported from the cloud side. However, maybe if you want to set up an endpoint, you will run into an error if this protocol isn't actually supported by the device. That's why we introduced a new smart trust template that allows you, or particularly the device, to report those protocols that it actually supports, so that only the user can only select protocols that are actually supported by the device. So per default, if nothing is sent by the device, you will see all options. But if the device supports it and reports which it actually supports, then only the supported are visible. Which is also provided as part of ThinEdge context. The next one is the visibility of child devices. So devices that are not directly connected to Cumulocity but via a gateway are modeled as so-called child devices. But other than that, they are actually just treated as devices or modeled as devices, with the small difference that they haven't had the is device fragment attached to them to differentiate between child devices and regular devices. However, this led to the situation that those devices aren't shown in the lists where devices are listed, like in the all device lists, or in the list where you select the devices which when addressing these devices via a bulk operation. And that's why we changed this default behavior and also add the is device fragment to also child devices, so that they will also be shown in each of these device lists. But this is also an optional functionality. So if you actually don't want this fragment to be added and don't want your child device to be shown here, you also have the chance to not include the fragment. Again, something that has also been introduced by ThinEdge, but also by the other integrations like Cloud Fieldbus and OPC-UA. And last but not least, we have a new approach to column configuration. So I already mentioned the device lists, which are quite prominent in device management. And you have the default columns, but what we now did was to, so you also can something you could already leverage was the ability to create custom columns, but where they need to define the header and the fragment path, which is quite not so straightforward to actually configure. And that's why we want to make that actually easier and leverage the digital twin manager for that, so that you can basically use the property library to model your properties, so that the administrator can model the properties that then can be just selected in your columns. if you want to set up custom columns. And that's basically it from the device management application side. I'm handing over to Jane to continue with the next exciting topic.
Thank you very much, Aaron. This is a bit of a glimpse of what is coming up in Q2. It's not yet available. We've been working hard on it for quite some time. What we will be providing is the ability to have a certificate signed by Cumulocity, so that now you can use certificate-based authentication, which, as we all know, is industry best practice, without having to go to the expense, time and effort of setting up your own PKI. To be very clear, this is going to be a very simple method. It will allow you to create a certificate authority on Cumulocity. You will then be able to register your device. You'll require a one-time password, and then a certificate will be created using that CA and returned to your device, and you will now be able to use certificate-based authentication for your devices. You can reissue certificates, you can disable them. So we think that this will be really good news for all of those customers who want to use certificate-based authentication but don't have the wherewithal to actually set up their own PKI. A useful snippet is that it will also conform to EST, and I've put the full wording of that so that everybody knows what EST actually stands for. We created this capability in conjunction with our colleagues on the ThinEdge team. Ruben, can I ask you to come on stage? Because I think I'm about to hand over to you, making me panic a bit there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to Ruben, who will take you through how ThinEdge uses this. We've worked very closely with our colleagues on the ThinEdge team in order to ensure that this works seamlessly if you're using ThinEdge, so that you can use ThinEdge with certificate-based authentication through to Cumulocity. Over to you, Ruben.
I'll try to keep this as non-technical as possible. So by all means, like, this is a fantastic feature, so we're really excited that we're able to then offer it. And so let's see it in action. So the idea is it makes onboarding devices really, really, really simple. And then in the end, you get a certificate, and everything after that happens automatically. So for ThinEdge, we'll do certificate renewal and all that kind of stuff. So there's no more having to worry about anything like that. Okay, so I've enabled this feature already in my tenant here. So I can actually see whether I have a Cumulocity certificate authority already by looking at the Trusted Certificates tab here in the Device Management app. And then I can see here, it also has a different symbol that says, hey, I'm a CA certificate. At the beginning, this doesn't exist, so you kind of need to opt into that as soon as you have like the feature flag enabled. Click Add CA Certificate. There is only one CA certificate per tenant, and then I'm good to go. So how does this look in devices? So once I've all done that, the enrollment is actually quite seamless or very similar to the existing kind of functionality if you've been registered devices in the past. So you can do it many different ways. So I'm just going to show you maybe a single device registration to start off with. So if I want to register a single device, we now have this option here to create a registration to get a certificate in the end. If I just type in example 5, I just chose a one-time password, which is device specific. So this is not a global Bootstrap password. This can be anything that you want, and it's only valid for this device. So once I have that, we go next. I can now see that this registration, so it's waiting for the device to connect now. So if I go to my device, because we have it tightly integrated with ThinEdge now, I can enter in the same information here, so the device ID, then my one-time password. I now have a certificate. That was it. Now I want to actually connect with such a certificate, and I'm now connected to the cloud. I didn't need to enter in any of my admin passwords because maybe I don't want to expose that to the device. I can't download the certificate again using that one-time password because it no longer exists in the platform. So I can now then navigate to my device, as you know, I'll do for any device when I register it. And this is my device, which I'm connected to. And you may notice that there's a new tab here called X509 for X509 certificates. And here I can then see for the provisioned certificates for this device that this is the serial number, and I can see a bit of like information about when it's expiring. But this is more for like meter information, because ThinEdge will then install a service which then does all of this automatically. So in 90% of the situations, you don't need to do anything there. But I can just, if you want to be proactive with the renewal, which just to demonstrate it, I've just renewed the certificate. Again, that's it. It's nothing really too complicated. And then in here, if I reload the list of the X509 certificates, I can then see this is the most recently issued, and this is the active certificate being used by the device. So again, very simple, it's transparent, and the integration with ThinEdge is right. It's quite nice. But the other kind of feature, which is fantastic, is this simplistic but secure nature to register devices. It's actually quite extendable. So in the example I showed before that I was generating this like one-time password in the platform and then putting it to the device. You can actually do it the other way around as well. And so you can build this into your own kind of registration process, whether you have like a, I don't know, Bluetooth app or something, or have like a web UI, you can kind of expose that. So I just want to show this kind of like how that could look in different situations. So if I have a custom registration script that I configure what tenant I want to connect to, my device ID, so I'll use something different now. Now I've decided for me, because I know my engineers actually hate typing something on the command line, but they can scan something with their phone. Or maybe in some instances, you can't scan that with your phone because maybe, I don't know, you don't have a QR code reader. But I can also click on the URL, which takes me to that registration thing page where everything's pre-filled for me. I just have to click next, I'm connected. And if we go back to the device has downloaded a certificate, it's on the connection, and then so everything's seamless, that everything has been issued to the device securely and in a simple way. So this is applicable for basically any devices. So this is part of like the upcoming feature that we have in Cumulocity. Like once that's delivered and you enable that, then it will also be enabled in ThinEdge. So there should be really a more pleasant onboarding and hands-off experience for ThinEdge users, so that you don't need to worry about certificate refreshing a certificate again. Okay, so with this, the upgrade path is seamless. Also, if you're going from, if you've already deployed devices with like self-signed certificates, you can just renew the certificate and then use the new CA certificate functionality, and then it will just work. So there's really like, you don't need to install something apart from upgrade the ThinEdge version, and then it should be like hands-off. So we're hoping that should be like a very good experience for everyone. In addition, kind of like ThinEdge feature highlights. So we have a team of developers doing this. So we're always doing like a whole heap of new features, but there's always a lot to list. But another kind of like highlight, which is also upcoming, is the support for hardware security modules, where we can actually then read and store the private key from a certificate in a secure manner and then access it from a HSM. So most notably, we're talking about like TPM2 modules and things like that. So it's all improving our security story, both in the platform and on devices. So, and like anything with ThinEdge, if you have any questions or feature requests, you can reach out to us on GitHub or Discord at any point in time.